Welcome to the Great Beer State podcast from the Michigan Brewers Guild. The Great Beer State is a weekly show sharing conversations and stories from the passionate people who contribute to our vibrant Michigan beer community. It is made up of a mix between full-length archived interviews from the Guild's first documentary book project, A Rising Tide, Stories from the Michigan Brewers Guild, and conversations recorded in the here and now. Each episode is kicked off with a conversational update from host Scott Graham, Executive Director of the Guild, and the beer-evangelist Fred Biltman, author of A Rising Tide. Here's Scott and Fred. Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State podcast. I'm Fred. I'm here with Scott. We've got a great episode today. We're going to talk to Dave Engbers. Well, we're going to share an interview with Dave Engbers of Founders Brewing Company that was recorded in the fall of 2018 for Rising Tide, Volume 1. And we'll start out checking in with you, Scott, and seeing what's going on in the world of Michigan beer and the Michigan Brewers Guild.
Well, as we record this intro, we're deep in the planning for our annual conference in January, just kind of been renamed Michigan's Great Beer State Conference. So a lot of work's going into that, and it's fun and exciting to be thinking about folks getting together in a learning environment and social environment. That's mostly what I have in mind. Of course, we're wrapping up the year. It's we're in December of 2021. Looking at next year and thinking about beer festivals, including the Winter Beer Festival. We've got tickets on sale for that and have started the registration process. So very much hoping that as we get into 2022, things kind of normalize. But I think there's a lot of uncertainty all the way around still with COVID still hanging out there.
Yep, and winter certainly, creates its challenges in terms of venues and indoors versus outdoors, and not only managing that space differently for the breweries and for events, but then the sort of the anxiety that goes with it and people making decisions about where and how they're going to go to places. So I think to me, it sends me back to the stuff we were championing early on, which is be kind, be flexible, make plans, check who's open, check what their procedures are when you're heading to a member brewery. I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of work to be hospitable. I don't think it's ever taken more work to be hospitable to guests than it does right now. So hopefully we can all show them our appreciation and follow whatever paths need to be done to enjoy beers together at breweries and at the conference and at our festivals in 2022.
Yep, that's a good and relevant comment. It is there's a lot of strain and stress still at breweries with short staff and trying to make ends meet and trying to be busy enough to keep going. So it continues to be a challenging environment.
Yep. Do you want to share any important dates for winter festivals for the public? Like when do tickets go on sale for winter and what weekend is that and any of that stuff?
Sure. Tickets are on sale now for the Winter Beer Festival. They actually went on sale December 2nd. I expect them to sell out probably closer to the event. So I don't think that anybody needs to be in a mad scramble, but I wouldn't wait too long. The festival date is, if I'm not mistaken, it's February 26th, but I'm going to look real quick to make sure I'm not saying something wrong. It is February 26th, 2022.
And for the uninitiated, it is an outdoor festival, despite it being February 26th in Southwest Michigan. Been all sorts of different weather for it, but gear up and enjoy the outdoors. And I think that's, for a festival, that's a little refreshing. That's been going on a long time. We're good at it. We know how to host a festival outdoors in the winter, and it makes it a lot less nervy about whether it'd be possible to host Winter Beer Festival with it being outdoors. I think it'll be clear of COVID protocols, or at least most likely.
Yeah, I agree. And it is really fun. It's one of our more popular festivals, I think, because there's less to do in the middle of the winter.
Mhm.
But it is definitely outside. You wear your winter boots or your winter clothes, hat, gloves, bundle up.
Yeah. They say there's no bad weather, there's just bad gear. So gear up, and we'll see you out there. So next up is introducing our guest. So this interview we've had in the vault for a little bit, from the Rising Tide Project, but it was a very enjoyable conversation. Dave has been a big and forward and engaged personality in the community, really since the inception of the Brewers Guild. And Founders, of course, is a very broadly reaching, successful brewery with a big brand presence and a lot of fans. So it's really interesting to hear him share stories from the early days and share how his perspective on how the scene and the kind of community came together. Any surprises for you or thoughts after hearing it back?
It like all of these interviews, it's really nice to hear people describe how they felt about things and how they got going. And Dave's comments about really becoming enchanted with beer culture with some foreign trips and seeing that it was, more than just drinking flavorless light lager
Yeah.
with friends, that there was a really social aspect to it, and wanting to bring that back. That's something that we talk about, long term. In 100 years, what's beer culture going to be like, and how did we help bring it along? And I think that's what so many in the community appreciate, is the cultural aspect and it being welcoming and fun and friendly. So it was nice to listen to Dave talk about that. It was also kind of fun to hear him mention his first homebrew kit, when he was in his late teens, and and how he got started experimenting with brewing.
Yeah, there have been a few present themes through many of these interviews. On the one side, it's been there have been a lot of times where, yes, they were home brewing, or yes, either they had started home brewing already or they started after, but a trip of some sort where the culture was the influencer versus I need to recreate this beer, or this one beer blew my mind. I find one of the themes is a lot of times it's more the sense of how beer was being engaged with culturally, how it was treated as a bringing together of people, and that was certainly Dave's experience, and we've heard that a lot. Then the other theme is nicking beers from your parents
Yeah.
as an influencer, and either the prevention of that or that influencing what somebody wanted to brew, or that they wanted to brew at all. So that's good stuff. I also thought it's another example. So we've had a few people from the sales world on throughout the seasons, but recently we had Wes O'Leary from Outside, and we talked a little bit about how the lanes of camaraderie have some different characteristics between the brew house or the production side. Is slightly different than the front of house sales side, especially distribution side. There can be a few different characteristics and maybe obstacles to finding that camaraderie when you're out there selling and targeting the same shelf space or tap handle. And I thought Dave had interesting insights there, and it's just great to keep bringing that perspective and that conversation forward. I think hopefully it helps all members, but especially new members, understand that that's a core belief of our community, is keeping that camaraderie present despite our market, the natural market competition.
Yep. Everybody's got to do the best they can to have a successful business, which means making sales, and
Mhm.
things can get to feeling competitive. So I think you're right. It's really important that we try and carry that feeling forward. And one of the comments that was made, I think you made it, is that fans of beer like to know that there's this camaraderie and friendliness within the industry. It goes just beyond the inside.
Yeah.
It's something that others notice and appreciate.
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back to the first thing that Dave mentioned, but also that we were just talking about, is it really reveals that there's a bigger culture, that there's a bigger thing than just selling stuff. I think when you see examples of it out there in the wild, that's when you start going, oh, this is different. There's a whole culture and community here, and that starts a different story.
Yeah.
So with that, we can hand it off to Dave. This was recorded at Founders in fall of 2018. Cheers. Thanks for listening.
Cheers to Dave and the entire Founders crew and everybody listening.
Absolutely.
But maybe we can start. Just tell me about your early days, how you came to be a brewery founder at all.
Why we decided to play in this arena?
Yeah, like what did it look like? Like, just when did you first have the idea, or when did you first get started?
I think the first idea was, I think I started stealing beer off my parents' back porch when I was about 15 years old. And so my dad's not much of a beer drinker. He used to drink Falstaff and Cincy Cream, whatever was on sale, Wiedemann's. It really wasn't until I think I was 17 years old I went to visit my oldest brother out in California, who I really didn't know very well. And he picked me up from the airport in San Fran. And first thing we did is went out to this little party store and bought 2 bombers of Mendocino County Red Tail Ale. And I always say that's the sip that changed my life. I'd never experienced beer that had that much flavor and complexity. And, in retrospect, it's kind of a middle of the road amber ale. But it was interesting nonetheless. And when I got back to Michigan shortly thereafter, I started experiencing other beers that were a little more interesting than what I was nicking off my parents' back porch. And then the same year, I actually had an opportunity to go to Europe. Went to England and Belgium, Netherlands. And what really interested me was beer culture. I think the beer was fun and interesting, new flavors, but how beer brought people together. And I saw that in a completely different light than what we have here in the United States. It was interesting to go into pubs and you'd see men and women and children, and it was just part of their culture that I saw a void here in the United States. When I thought of bars in the U.S., I think of men watching TVs the whole time and sporting events, and there it was just like it just brought a community together, and that's what really interested me. So at the age of 19, my parents bought me my first homebrew kit. My parents were a little bit older. I'm the fourth of 4 kids, and so I think they were a little tired of parenting, and they kind of gave me a long leash. So my mom said, if you love beer so much, why don't you make your own? Mm-hmm. And so that was my first start homebrewing when I was 19 years old. And
she's getting you off the back porch,
Yeah.
It's like her way of locking up their beer on the back porch. Here you go.
I realized quickly how bad that beer was. But anyway, so started homebrewing and then, went off to college. And like most kids, you're on a budget. And so in college, I started drinking more of the high octane. We were drinking a lot of Schlitz and Mickey's, stuff that had high octane.
Yep.
But during my college years, I also studied in Austria and got to travel all over Europe and really, again, it was really more about the culture of bringing people together and seeing how, regardless of which country we were in, beer was just so much ingrained in their day-to-day life, much more so than here in the U.S. And so that's kind of where the idea came from. My partner Mike and I were college friends, and I said, we got to start a brewery. And at the time, I think Bell's was the only brewery. Kalamazoo Brewing Company was the only brewery in the state. And that was our goal, to become the second brewery. And by the time we, wrote a business plan and revised it 20 some times and needed to go out and raise capital, scratching and clawing, family and friends, seeing what we could do. Anyway, it took us a hell of a lot longer than what we thought it was going to take.
So what year do you think you guys said, let's do this, to what year you opened?
I think that was 94. Mike and I had conversations while we were in college. I got out of college, I taught elementary school. Mike was working for his dad's company. But after my first year of teaching was 94, and I called Mike and I said, we have to do this. I said, I never want to say what if. And that was kind of the premise of, let's not, live life without regrets, and let's move forward and let's give this a go. And, it was also with the asterisks of, we're young. If this doesn't work, we can bounce back and do something else.
Yeah.
And not really fully understanding the commitment and the work that lay ahead of us.
Yeah. And then you guys opened in 97-ish?
So we opened November of 97. And what was interesting is our goal was to become the second brewery, microbrewery in the state of Michigan. I think there are actually a couple others on the east side that we didn't know about at the time. But, there's a handful of breweries that were all in the same boat. New Holland, Robert Thomas, Jim Rafi over in Holland, Michigan. A bunch of them just kept opening up, and we'd heard about this guy, Tim Surprise, who was kind of taking this, he had a little bit of a road show trying to get investors. Anyway, so it's really frustrating every time you open up the paper.
You got some Detroit guys like Motor City and Traffic Jam.
Yeah, those guys were there. There's a handful of things going on the other side of the state. But it was really frustrating every time you open the paper and see, oh, there's a new brewery opening up here. And we kept thinking our window of opportunity was just closing on us. But, now in retrospect, you look back 22 years later, and, now people think of us as some of the pioneers.
Yeah. So you find a way to get open. I mean, that would be a whole conversation just talking about that process. But when you do get open, regardless of where it is, I would love to hear, what was your first awareness of Brewers Guild conversation?
Well, first of all, I would say, even before the Brewers Guild, the culture, like there weren't customers. No one knew they wanted craft beer at the time.
Right.
I remember when we actually opened our pub, we did our grand opening, which was fantastic because we had all our investors and our bank. Our bankers were there, our attorneys, and that was fun. But the second day we were open, and it was crickets.
Right.
So the landscape was completely different. Craft beer didn't have the following that it does today. But early on, I remember when we opened up our pub, Rex and Mary Halfpenny showed up, and we're so proud. This thing was bright and shiny. All the stainless was clean. The floors are brand new, and that's when we started hearing about this Michigan Brewers Guild. And I think at the time there were about 30 breweries. The first year that we participated in the Michigan Brewers Guild Summerfest.
Yeah, that's all right.
And that was at Greenmead, right?
Yep.
And that was interesting because I think initially, after reading these articles and hearing about these other breweries all over the place, I think we all kind of looked at each other as competition. This is the guy that beat me to the punch. But it didn't take too long until we started meeting each other and realizing that we've all shared in the same challenges and struggles, whether it was, from from a production standpoint with equipment, or whether it was a banking issue.
From an audience point of view. Like
Yeah, I
you
mean-
said there was no audience. Well, if we don't develop an audience, none of us are going to make it.
Right.
I felt like it took a minute for us to grasp that.
I don't think it took that long. I
No,
think,
but it took that turn of like, I don't know, opening and or having a few cricket moments to realize there's a bigger challenge here than
Yeah.
just us making beer.
Yeah, I think the challenge was, creating a community of beer enthusiasts. And I think it's also important to look back at some of the folks who did the really heavy lifting, Larry Bell included, but the Sierra Nevadas, the Fritz Maytags. There are a lot of people that did a lot of the heavy work and trailblazing. And I think we were kind of that second generation of breweries that came out, coupled with, that's when the internet started popping out and information became readily available. And I think it was our generation of brewers that really created this community of beer enthusiasts. Great Beer, Beer Advocate came out. And I think that was really, really important to connecting with our consumers and getting information about what we do, why we do it.
Would you say that it sort of amplified or reverberated some of the ethos that was in the homebrewing community and brought it to a group of people that didn't have to learn how to brew to do that? Because I feel like some of those principles, the talking about beer and the showing up at tastings and pre-internet, there was a lot of homebrewers that would show up to things that I remember coming into that community going, wow, I didn't know this existed.
Right.
And then as the internet built some connective tissue, beer enthusiasts could have that same sort of conversation. They didn't have to be brewers to do it. And it seemed like it made that ring able to grow.
Yeah, widen the ring a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
I always think, and I still do, like when we go into markets, obviously craft beer is now everywhere. It's what, this generation, it's all they'll ever know. But that used to be one of the first things I did when I was on the road is go to the local homebrew shop, because you realize that that's a major influencer. The guy who's selling malt extract and hops and yeast and, those carboys, those are the guys who's going to talk to all of their homebrew community.
Yeah.
And it's really, really important. And it's beer. And that's what I think is really awesome. So those people are very vocal.
And I think there were some interesting concepts or perspectives to develop in that, I remember just kind of chewing on the idea of like, well, homebrewers are great in that they're very vocal and their endorsement carries a lot of salt.
Gave you a little bit of
But
clout.
they're not necessarily going to buy our beer every day because they have a ton of beer in their basement and they're going to buy every beer that comes
Right.
out. And so they're not necessarily the loyal customer, but they're a huge microphone,
Right.
megaphone. And I feel like there's this relationship that I started to look at it the same way, like, well, a chef or a restaurateur actually wants people to cook, because the better the cook they are, the more they appreciate a good restaurant.
Right.
They may not eat there out of necessity because they can cook just fine at home, but they're going to actually value the work in a different way. And I feel like that was one of the turns we saw, was like, hey, the more people know about beer and can make it, they can see the difference between our beer and major domestic beer.
And I think that's always been a challenge because, in all respect to all the homebrewers, we recognized really quickly that homebrewers were always right.
Yeah.
No matter what we did, as our brand started growing and we started winning some bigger awards and getting some recognition, and I remember we had kind of broached this, from Rate Beer, Beer Advocate. We're getting a lot of accolades, and we hosted a homebrew party down in our old tap room, and some of the homebrewers were telling us that they were willing to sell us their recipes. And I sort of said, all right, come on, guys. But they're very vocal, and to your point, like with the chefs, I think the consumers are not loyal, which I'm fine with. I love the fact that I love our beer, but I'm not necessarily 100% loyal to Founders either, because I love trying beers from all over the place. And the one thing I do think we kind of recognized is, as the industry changed, we realized that all too often, especially in the media, everyone wants to say that, you know, this is the best brewery, this is the best IPA, and you know, we're more about just celebrating beer in general and saying, you know, no one has to be the best, because we're all different. We all taste things, experience things in unique ways. So I don't like necessarily using those words. When we do beer dinners, I talk about, we have a shared experience today. We'll share some stories, we'll share some of our challenges. It seems like everyone wants to know where all the names come from. But I said, you know, today is just about having a shared experience, talking to people, meeting new friends, and building these relationships. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that sort of context is what also gave us as a community the challenge of growing a bigger audience, is that, okay, if you're actually accepting sort of a lack of loyalty as a positive part of your customer's ethos, and you're dealing with this just different way of going about things, that, hey, try everything, enjoy things, and drink around the horn, as I find myself saying, that means you need more people in the tent.
Right.
If they're going to drink you part of the time. And they're drinking bigger beers with bigger alcohol, so they're going to drink less units.
Right.
And drink you less frequently. You end up just needing a larger community than say the beer brands prior to our generation. Their model would have looked entirely differently.
Yeah.
Which is, we need to get a drinker, we need to lock them in, and figure out how many they drink a week, and we need to be all of them. Right. And so we were really changing the model, as well as saying, okay, so I guess I'm just going back to, I'm kind of circling back around that idea of that we had to bring our experience to more people than the people who celebrated and created that first energy. We needed to widen that.
Throw a wider net.
To a wider net. And now there's a huge difference in the number of people that are aware of craft beer, that say they love craft beer. They don't have to be an expert anymore. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think the one question we still ask is, why do people love beer? Is it the flavor? Is it the atmosphere of the pubs? I think the pubs and tap rooms have made a big influence. I still go back to our early days when we opened our tap room, and Jason Spalding and Brett Vanderkamp came down, and Mike and I went to college with those guys, and so we're all college buddies. And I was bartending, and this was in the early days where our pub was much smaller, and so I could bartend and sit down and have a beer with somebody at the same time. But anyway, we were hanging out.
And probably do a crossword puzzle as well. You know.
We were yucking it up a little bit, and I was kind of watching the bar at the same time while we're having beers, and a lot of our regulars kept turning around looking at us, and they said, when Jason and Brett took off, they said, "Who are those guys? You guys were having a lot of fun." And we said, "Oh, those are the guys that started New Holland." And to see the response from our regulars saying, "Well, that's your competition."
Yeah.
And we're like, "No." We're like, those are buddies. And I think that was the spark that, when I realized our customers like to see us get along. It was one of those things where I realized that, not only does this affect us personally, but the beer community likes to see us, having a good time with each other.
Absolutely. And some of the more challenging times, and as I was involved with the leadership of the guild, I remember using a analogy of like, so if you see a couple arguing at a table in a restaurant or a bar, like, do you walk towards the table, or do you skirt around it and try to stay the hell away? Like, if our community is fighting in public, if we're airing this out, if we're putting it on the customers, if we're putting our feuds or debates or any friction that may be just a natural part of any community, we put that on our customer, what are they going to do? Right. We're in the process of trying to invite them in.
Right.
This will send them away.
Right.
And so I loved that part of the guild of like, we're not saying we have to have an absence of disagreements or discord or friction. We're saying let's work it out
Yeah.
as a community, and let's do it in the right place at the right time, and then go out and work the invitation of the public together.
Yeah. I think our industry as a whole has matured. I think one thing we recognized pretty early on was this is a business. Initially, we started a brewery because our goal was to start a brewery in our hometown, and all of a sudden when you realize that one, you're starting a brewery, but this is a business, and to be a business you need to be profitable. And all of a sudden, it was a little bit of a shift in thinking, at least for me personally. It's like, I wanted to build this thing up so we could be a part of the fabric of our community here. And initially that was our idea, that we were going to be a little brewery in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And it has just continued to grow and grow and grow. But it really took us until we realized that, we're making an impact not just on this community, but, as our brand grew, to be a Midwestern brand to, now essentially a national brand. It's really been interesting to see how quickly this has happened. We've been doing this 22 years, and it seems like, that's a pretty short time frame to make the impact. Not just us, the entire brewing community, now close to 7,000 breweries across the U.S.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Cheers to it.
Cheers.
So kind of circling back to the early days, can you share any thoughts of your early guild experience, guild stories? Like, can you spot where either the community started to turn a corner? Because I think we both recognize those early days were not kumbaya. And do you remember either the community turning the corner or you having a change in insight about what this community could be?
Well, I think, early on we had the one summer beer fest.
Yeah.
And it was a party. I mean, it was a celebration of beer.
And the guests outnumbered the brewers. That was important.
Oh yes, absolutely. But we stayed up later.
It's true.
I think back on some of the meetings that the annual meeting, where we're trying to, as a group, we're trying to raise the level of awareness and the maturity of our industry. But I also recall some 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, we didn't do it with an abundance of maturity.
We didn't.
It was a maturing path paved with immature behavior.
Yeah.
Into the wee hours.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I just don't remember anymore.
Yeah.
But I remember the summer beer fest. One, that it just made a huge impact on the beer enthusiast community. They came out in droves. And I just remember setting up our booths and the camaraderie of, as an industry, you're hanging up your banners and you have your draft box, and everyone forgets something. And I remember, I ran out of zip ties, and how quickly everyone else was to help you out and to support you and say, I ran out of this. And all you have to do is just look down the row of your friends and the other brewers, and people are like, oh, here's my wrench. Well,
and the setting too was granted, I remember doing tastings, and there were some other events out there in the world that as a beer person you did. But it seems like they were zero compared to what it is now. Meaning you didn't have your sort of street ready festival kit together, because you maybe did a couple, 3, 4 a year,
right,
where now you might do that in a weekend as a brewery.
Right.
And so I feel like that readiness and the willingness to help at an event was even bigger thing than we could imagine it being today.
Yeah.
Because we were all green and hardly had a jockey box to our name to pour beer.
Yeah, I mean back in those days, we were borrowing jockey boxes from your wholesaler,
Yeah.
and all of a
Who
sudden,
still didn't believe this thing was going to take off. It was like, well, I can lend you a box.
right?
Yeah,
They're
good luck.
expensive.
Yeah. Make sure you bring it back.
I just remember picking up those boxes from your wholesaler, and you start pouring beer through them, and all of a sudden you realize that there's been beer sitting in this thing for 4 months, and your beer doesn't taste right. So it didn't take too long before too many bad experiences until you realize, all right, I need to invest in our own equipment.
Yeah. But that comes up a lot, the scenario of whether it's and I think this is one of the first ones where we're talking about events. But so often people point to what camaraderie looks like, and they point to, when somebody needs help and the other one offers it, when somebody runs out of grain or hops or, cup sugar. And I think the event thing, I think the sales and marketing side is always slower to help one another because it's more directly competitive.
Yeah.
The brewers are in their brew house and they're both brewers making beer.
Yeah.
The salespeople are competing for that same shelf spot, and the one tap handles gets wiggle loose. And so, I think it's always harder in that arena, and the festival is a great example of one of the first places we started to model a different way of being.
Yeah, I remember the first time we as a company made beer, we were actually contract brewing in Minneapolis, and we're brewing pale ale, and we had to find a brewery that had the same brewing equipment, same bottling line, same heritage bottle, that short squatty bottle that we use, and we're doing in, and all of a sudden we realized that our malt supplier had shorted us 55 pounds of caramel 120 or something like that. We were short 1 bag of grain, and our recipe wasn't going to be where it's supposed to be. And we're in Minneapolis, and we're like, you know what? There's a brewery right down the road, Summit Brewing Company. And this is before the internet. Pulled out the yellow pages, made a quick phone call, and said, we're brewing right now. We need a bag of, caramel 120. And they said, it'll be at our front desk. Pay us when you get a chance. And I drove 3 miles down the road, picked it up, and all of a sudden I realized, I'm like, this is pretty cool. This is the community we're joining. And it has been, it's been a crazy ride to see the rise of all these breweries and how now they're just commonplace. And every community around the entire state has great beer.
So do you think the challenges have changed, the challenges to that camaraderie and sort of joining together on a common mission of bringing a larger audience to what we do? Has that changed with the current climate and number of breweries?
I think the climate has changed for the positive. The one thing that's great is the quality of liquid continues to rise. I think it was one of the things that we were very skeptical of a few years ago, when we want to make sure that people are getting into this arena for the right reasons. This isn't just a get rich quick scheme. This is about doing this because of your love for the craft of what you're doing, and to see a lot of access to equipment and starting a brewery is a lot easier now, where banks are willing to loan money for pubs and microbreweries. But I think it's really important that people get in it for the right reason. And that was one of our major concerns as we'd heard about the influx of all these breweries that are in the planning stages, that we keep the quality of the liquid that's got to be first and foremost. And I think people are learning, and that's one of the benefits of us getting together, that we get to help each other out. And hopefully we can be an influencer, since we've been doing this for a long time, that people recognize that, and we're always willing to help the new guys out and make the best liquid they can.
You have thoughts on how do we, besides modeling it, besides remaining helpful, what are, do you have any words of encouragement, specifically in terms of, at least to start, specifically towards this community and this atmosphere or climate, What are your words to a brewer starting out in terms of how to continue to pay that forward?
Ultimately, I tell everyone, I'm like, hone your craft first. Don't just go out with a bunch of, funny names and potential labels. Really think about your motivation. Why are you doing this in the first place? It's perhaps a bit unfair that we were afforded this luxury that we didn't have this big audience when we started.
Yeah.
We
were allowed a little time to stumble.
We had a good 3 years to really figure things out, hone our craft. In today's world, when people, basically live with computers and in their pockets, we created a community of beer enthusiasts. So if you open up a brewery, there's going to be 600 people at your door in your first weekend.
You're going to have a review,
and
fairly or not, before they're done with their pint.
Yeah,
you will be reviewed somewhere. And,
you can be a champion, or you can get thrown to the lions your first day, and that's not fair.
Giving you there isn't time.
Yeah, and that's I guess this world's not fair. I mean, we struggled to build a community of beer enthusiasts, and now the community is here. And I tell everyone when we do events, I'm like, support your local breweries and give these folks a shot, just like any restaurateur.
And give them a few shots.
Give them a few shots. I'm like, it took us a while to, we had this luxury, this buffer, if you will, to hone our craft and really figure out what we were doing and how to differentiate ourselves from all the other brands. And these new breweries, hopefully that they have a vision. And I guess as a company, we realized at a certain point you need to figure out who you are, what you're doing, what your vision is, because although we're all in the same industry, our business model is completely different from the brewery down the road.
And what's the invitation, though, for them to become an active, supportive, collegial member of the
guild?
brewing community, the Michigan brewing community overall, either guild specifically, but also just as a fellow brewery member?
Well, I think anyone that's in this industry, you got to really look at it and say, why am I doing this? Are you brewing to make a difference? Are you brewing beers for your local community? Are you going to continue to push the envelope and create things that have never been done before? It's the same question that you'd ask any chef. Are you just trying to give people sustenance, or are you giving people an experience? And I think that's what we like to do, is we want to challenge people. I always say we push the liquid envelope. We're going to challenge people a little bit. And there's an ebb and flow to this category. We cut our teeth in this kind of extreme beer movement. All our beers were high gravity, very intense, very complex. And the whole category now has changed. The domestic beer scene has changed significantly. Bud, Miller, and Coors, their numbers domestically have been on a steady decline. And we're looking at it like the entire industry now is changing, and the generation needs to find a brewery that they can connect to. So now as a larger brewery, we're going to play in that arena a little bit and say, you know what? Why not have a craft brewery join the ranks of these other great brewers and create something that might have a little wider appeal? So we've kind of come full circle. That doesn't mean that we're turning our back on our barrel aged series or big complex stouts or imperial IPAs, but it allows us to do a little for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And so, getting close to wrapping, what do you think looking specifically at the Michigan Brewers Guild? What do you think? You could look at this either way. Like, what would our world look like without us having come together and created this organization? And or the other side of that, the positive side, is what do you think the existence of the Michigan Brewers Guild has put forward into our community, either as a state of people, drinkers, or as a community of professionals?
Well, I would say if we didn't have a guild, if the Michigan Brewers Guild never existed, that the state of beer in Michigan would be nowhere near where it is today. I think the camaraderie, this fraternity of brewers has done nothing but take the level of professionalism to our entire category and really raise the bar. It's been great to see how we've all kind of figured out that we can all play in this arena, and we all have, all of our brands kind of fit different niches. And it's been, we realized that pretty early on when, when there's a brewery 20 miles away from you or 5 miles down the road, that we realized that we're all different. All of our brands are different. We speak to different people, and the lack of loyalty is okay. And
we can share drinkers. That somebody going to your place and then to our place and then to their place, that's good.
Yeah, I
rather
love,
than where are you going? Come back.
Right.
I think we learned to relax and let go and be like, yeah, you ought to go see them, and then come back around and that movement, that the same thing that feels like somebody leaving you can feel like a really positive energy and momentum if you let it.
One of my favorite things is, we're blessed with the fact that beer enthusiasts love to travel. They want to go to the source. They want to see it, smell it, feel it, touch it. It's our pubs have become a huge part of our brand. This has allowed us to say, this is kind of who we are. This is the personality of this brewery. But the beer enthusiasts, the beer tourism, these folks are coming in from all over the world now, and we understand that they don't just come to Grand Rapids and go to Founders. They're going to Founders. They're going to New Holland. They're going to Brewery of
with a
Avant.
map out of their pocket.
Yeah, they pull the map out.
Arrows and
there's nothing. I think this is always a conversation. So you sit down and chat with somebody and say, where are you from? And they say, oh, we're from Cincinnati, and we've got a great local brewery called Rheingeist, but we kept hearing those guys talking about Grand Rapids and Beer City, USA. And so they come up here and they get to have a couple of our beers, and then someone will say, I really like Belgian beers. And I say, oh, Jason and Chris Spalding have a great little place, less than a mile from us, and it gives you a lot of pride to send them somewhere knowing that they're going to be treated well, they're going to have a great experience, and after they leave Vivant, they're going to go, oh, we got some other folks right down the road at Harmony Brewing Company, and it really is kind of fun to send people knowing that they're going to have a great experience in our community, and hopefully they come back every year.
Yeah. So looking forward, anything you're excited about for the community, or anything that you think it's really important people pay attention to heading forward?
I think ultimately with the Guild, it's important to realize that, you and I have talked about it for years, the rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah.
If we can work together as a community of brewers, we're not always going to agree on everything. I think one of the challenges that we're going to have is we're going to realize, or have already realized, that the pubs, the brew pubs have a different agenda than the microbreweries. The nano breweries have a different agenda than the larger breweries. But we have to work together. And ultimately, it's about working together and figuring out what is best for all of us as a community.
Yeah. I remember you and I have sung this chorus several times at different events, but it's also as simple as drink each other's beer.
Yeah.
I know you and I have been arm in arm at hospitality at the festival before, saying, drinking beers that are neither of ours and saying, what's great? We drink each other's beer.
Right.
And I feel like that is a metaphor for all of it.
Yeah. I think it's fun when we have dinner parties at our house, and I just tell everyone, I'm like, oh, the back fridge, the beer fridge is in the back, and people come in, and I usually have, a few of our beers in there, but I also have beers from, all over the world that, as I travel, I get to grab some beers that maybe aren't distributed here, and people are amazed. They're like, 80% of the beer in your fridge isn't yours. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I love what we do. I'm really proud of it. But to me, it's about that experience, about trying new things. And there is no right or wrong. I don't like infected beer, but I love
it was intentional.
intentional. Yeah,
Like,
that's not bad.
you know, bugs introduced artistically are different than
Yes,
the
absolutely.
bugs that broke the wall down and came in and snuck past the brewer. you
Right.
know?
But I love that, and I think again that's breaking down one of those barriers when people, as simple as just going into your fridge and saying, you've got bottles of Black Tuesday, or you got a bunch of Russian River beers. I think it's kind of fun that they realize that we're on this journey together, and I'm going to try something new. And sometimes the beers, you love them. Sometimes I'm not afraid to pour anything down the drain either, just because I got a heady topper.
Yeah.
If a beer's
nor do you have to go to the internet and tell the world that this beer sucked because you didn't like a beer or because it had a problem. Like, I think that's totally off topic in a way, but I think this idea that, hey, I can have an unpleasant experience, and what did I risk? I risked a few minutes of my life.
Yeah.
And I can replace it with a great experience after. I think that's maybe a call to the drinkers and outside of this even scope, but it's like, it is a maturing aspect of like, man, we don't have to punch the keys every time.
Yeah. Well, I don't punch any key. I don't do any social networking, but I do think, I don't know, is it shorts? Life's too short to drink crappy beer or whoever. I firmly believe that. And I've cracked one of our beers that might be sitting in the fridge too long. And I have no problem leaving a beer, in a glass or throwing it down the drain. Because I truly believe anytime we drink beer, it should be great.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for spending the time.
Absolutely. Have fun on this
Good work,
journey,
man. It's been a long ass journey. We've seen some things.
We've seen a lot of things, forgotten a lot of things. Well, this should be fun. I'm really proud of you guys doing this. I'm looking forward to seeing this.
Thanks for listening and sharing while supporting Michigan breweries and craft beer everywhere. The Michigan Brewers Guild was formed in 1997, with its first summer beer festival taking place in July of 1998. Its now 5 annual festivals are dedicated exclusively to Michigan beer brewed by more than 270 member breweries. The Michigan Brewers Guild exists to promote and protect the passionate Michigan beer industry in every way possible. To learn more, visit us at mibeer.com or say hello on one of our social media pages, as we love hearing from you. From coast to coast, from far and near, let's drink Michigan beer.
Let's drink